So
Wow. Do you both go by Miller?
yes.
There you go. So you're in business together. Is that because you were in business together before? I'm just going to say Apple and let you go on with that. How did that all come about?
I guess we've actually been in business together our entire married life. Except for when I started Apple Care, there was about maybe a 2 or 3 year gap, or
Mhm.
maybe 2 years that we weren't actually in the same business together. And we'll be married 34 years this summer.
Wow.
Da, 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 this
Yeah,
summer.
unusual. We're together a lot in a good way.
Yay.
That's
Yay.
great.
Were you in a different business? I mean, I really don't know. I don't usually know much about the people except where they are right now. When I say, "Oh, would you come to the table and talk about aging? Wouldn't you love to talk about aging?" I actually find people are like, "Yes, please."
Yes, please.
Yeah. Was it about care when you said you're pretty much your whole married lives?
Yes, so before I started Apple Care, which was in 2006, before that,
Oh.
after I graduated college, I went into my family's business, and we were manufacturer representatives, and we sold china, crystal, silver, that kind of thing, wedding present kind of thing.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I did that for close to 20 years. And my husband and I were in the business together. Along at one point when I was a kid, my uncle, my grandfather, two cousins, and my dad. It was a real family business
That is
stretching
wonderful.
across
Yeah.
multiple states. So it was really nice. I'm located in Dallas, so we had a showroom at the Dallas Trade Mart, and I did that for quite some time. And about 2005, I just started kind of wanting to do something a little more substantial, maybe making a difference a little bit more. And I
Right.
just
Something
started
of substance.
researching something of substance. And I just started researching industries. So I'm kind of looking at other things to do. I have graduated with a business degree at that time. And at the same time, my grandparents, I have longevity in my family. My grandparents were living in their own apartment. They lived in Memphis and doing wonderfully. They had unregulated care back then. It
Mhm.
just women from the local church kind of helped. They had 24/7 care. My aunt who lived there too was able to be a daughter and not really hands-on care, but they lived in their own apartment. My grandfather passed away. He was 96, and my grandmother passed away at 100 in a couple of days. That's another great story that I'll share. And my aunt that I just mentioned, she is currently 101. So
Wow.
at the time, 17 years ago, I was just kind of thinking about what business, and they were still alive at the time. And I just kind of like, wait a minute. Every time I open the paper, people are living longer, people are living healthier. And the idea of non-medical home care it just kind of started hitting me in the face, and I saw it everywhere. So I researched it. And we aren't nurses. We don't have nurses on staff, but I started Apple Care and Companion to help with personal care and companionship. And my granny and gramps were really the inspiration behind that, because they aged so successfully. If one had to go into the hospital, the other was able to stay home in their own apartment with some care. So it was just they were independent. They could do what they wanted. It was really a beautiful, they just aged so gracefully. And looking at that, it was like, well, let's see what we can do with that. So that's kind of the inspiration of why I started the company and the field. And then my husband joined me. We actually had our separate businesses. He was still in my family's business, still doing that. But when I opened an office, he moved into my office, but still doing his business. But you learn by osmosis. So he heard me on the phone, and then I was doing everything, but he was learning a lot along the way. And then eventually we closed the family business, and he came full time and was able to take over all the stuff that I didn't like to do, payroll and taxes and billing and all the stuff that, when you're going to see clients, you have to get everything done. So it worked out really well. And we're still, since 2006, we've been in business going on 16, 17 years.
That's the truth. You're almost at 2 decades. And I walked into, I didn't know that I was going to be a caregiver when I woke up that morning. And the change was actually a neighbor who said, "You'd be really good at it. And I'm so shorthanded."
Yeah.
And so I'm like, what do you do?
Wow.
I need to know this ahead of time. I hadn't a clue. I mean, we'd been around each other, but the subject of her spot was hired caregivers who came into wherever you are, but independent living, and you're already there, independent living community.
Mhm.
So you're already there, you're a familiar face, and the trust is built. So we picked out China patterns. I'm wondering if you had anything to do with that. We're coming up to, oh my goodness, are we coming up to 38 or 39? It's getting to that point where I just keep thinking 40. We've definitely known each other for over 40 years, so I'm going to have to do the math. But while I'm doing the math, Lori LeMasters, I heard her say they were aging so successfully, and people would be like, I want to do that, but I don't want to think about aging. I just want it to, and there was a community, you said a church ladies, there was a community of people who were like, well, we just do this. This is just what we do. And that it was like an extended family. And you also said that their daughter could just be a daughter. She knew what was going on, but she could just come in and not have to play seesaw on some of that. And that fits some people better. So Lori LeMasters, I bet a few bells are ringing for you on all of this.
For sure.
Sure.
I, like Lori Miller, had a completely different career. I was a mortgage professional for 30 years and had worked my way up in that industry, into the executive world, and got a call in the middle of the night that my mother had survived a massive stroke. And she was the caregiver for my father, who was on dialysis, who had recently started dialysis, and she was struggling with that. I, at the time, lived in a suburb of Denver, where I had been for a long, long time, and my parents still lived in Culver City, which is near Venice Beach, California, in our family home where we grew up. And so when I got the call, I flew to LA to find out the situation, and it was a lot more dire than we had heard. The doctors were saying if she lives, she'll never come home again. And so I called my adult son, who I'm very close with, my son and daughter-in-law, and we don't live more than 5 miles apart ever. And I called him and I told him the situation, and we both agreed, you absolutely have to move home. You have to make sure grandma comes home. You can't let them put her anywhere. And so I did that. I moved back home. It was a 3-year journey while my dad still lived. And then once he passed away, I moved my mom out to Colorado for another 5 years. So it was a total 8-year journey, caring for them. And I used a balance of both agencies and hiring friends. Like at one point, I hired the mailman's sister, because she had lost her job, and she came over and she just had a heart that I just knew she'd be good, and whatever. So over those 8 years, you use all these different resources that you can find. But there was no planning. My parents were very active, very They were in their 70s and traveling around the country and, living that aging life that we plan for, right? And then overnight, it kind of changed. And I love, Lori, what you do, because I think it's so important. We're in a society now that has realized that some of that long-term care, some people can afford that, a lot of people can't. And so how can we keep our loved ones at home living the life that they want to live, even as those challenges become greater and greater? And we always think medical, nurses, this and that, and it's not always that. As you can see, I was being really healthy playing pickleball,
Yes.
I fell and broke my wrist. But the bigger challenge to that, so I'm 65, so I'm considered, an aging person, even though in my mind I don't feel like that description describes me, but I am. And we live a very active life. But through this process, I also have rheumatoid arthritis. And I had to get off my medication for surgery and stuff. And it has been a difficult couple of weeks. And I can see where, if I didn't have medications to help manage that disease, I would be in need of a company like yours, Lori, for sure.
Yeah. And we do a lot of that short term kind of, someone has a fall and we just help them get back to where they were, and then we're gone. And I think a lot of people don't realize that it can be, you turn it on and turn it off. It's not a forever thing. And it's just to get you back to being independent and doing for yourself.
Right.
Absolutely. But there's something
that is an issue, of like, if I give in, if I start to relax, if I let someone help me, well, everything's just gonna, and
Right.
so do you personally, Lori Miller, go to the person and kind of give them a pep talk about, this is what it's about, and our aim is not to keep you, if your aim is to regain?
Right. So we always do an in-person consult or an assessment to, make sure that they don't need the medical side. And you're right, Lori, most people don't need nursing care. That's not what they need. But yeah, I mean, we write a care plan. But to me, the most important thing is and I constantly write, let the client do as much as they can for themselves and just be there. Because, and I know I'm sure you both have talked about aging and purpose, that we all have to have purpose. And if we don't have a reason to get up, or if we don't feel worthwhile or validated, you just decline. So we instruct our care pros to be there for somebody, but they should try to do as much as they can, whether it's, putting on their own clothes or doing their own hair, do as much as they can. But if there's a fall risk or a balance issue, or like you said, Lori, if there's arthritis and they can't maybe do buttons, but they could maybe do Velcro or zippers or something. So, just really encourage people, not necessarily cook for somebody, but cook with somebody. And just find out what they want. Some people, they've cooked all their life and they're happy to let that go. But for others, I'll say, we'll be your sous chef and you cook and we'll clean up. But it really does make people feel good to do as much as they can. So yeah, we try to figure out what it is that their goals are and what they want. And actually having care come into the home can keep you independent longer. And that's the whole point. But yeah, it's a process, and it's a kind of a dance, a give and a take, because you also have to build that trust with that person. You just can't unless you have to. I mean, unless you have two broken arms and you physically.
Right. And personalities come into play, huge. Like, my mom was left an expressive aphasic, and she was paralyzed on her right side. So for those who don't know, an expressive aphasic is someone who is completely clear-headed. They understand everything, but they can't use words at command to communicate their desires. So in my mom's case, she said do, and she thought she was saying full-on sentences and words. So after a while, it became a joke, and like she would do me, and then look at me like, do it, and I'd go, Mom, you just said do. I don't know what that means. And then she'd go, I did? I'm like, yes, that's what you said to me, right? So
That's amazing.
for me, the challenge was fear of letting someone come in to assist, because I really was worried they wouldn't understand her. She might, certain necessities could get neglected or whatever. So in my work with caregivers, I tried to educate them to think outside the box, bring in help. They don't have to do hands-on help with your loved one. They can do those other things, like you said, light cooking, a little light housekeeping, some laundry, making sure your loved one is safe while you're still allowed. You can be there and you can be watching over, the care. You can be doing the care for your loved one, right? Or you can, most important thing you said, your aunt was still able to be the daughter, right? That's such a difficult place when you in our case, my mom, we're a Latino family, and it's very common in my culture that you keep your loved one at home. It's very multi-generational, right?
Right.
And so that wasn't much of a question. It was logistically, how do we do it? But it became evident very early on that we had to transfer roles, because she couldn't speak and she couldn't walk on her own. So I had to be in charge. That was so hard for her in the beginning, because she was the matriarch of our family, So
Wow.
it would have been easier if I'd have known earlier about agencies like yours, that I could have had someone come in and then I could have found a better balance.
And I think when you do that, even if you have that role reversal, which, like in your case, it had to happen, but you still you do it with that respect. She's still your mother.
Absolutely.
And with regard, and I have a quick story. When my mother passed away, she was actually in the hospital, rehab hospital, LTAC, the whole system, 9 yards, for 9 months before she passed away. It was a pretty tough situation. But the week before she passed, and she was here, and I saw her every single day. I mean, both my brothers and my husband, we went every single day. And I didn't go one day because I had a appendicitis.
Oh.
And I had went to the hospital and I had to get it out. And so I'm like, don't tell Mom. And she was on a ventilator, feeding tube, the whole 9 yards. And we could still communicate. She'd talk over the vent, and which is a whole nother funny story, but a relative funny.
Wow.
But so I told my brothers, I said, do not tell her I'm in the hospital. I don't want her to worry, and just tell her I didn't feel good. And that's why I didn't visit. And so the minute I get out of the hospital, and it was like the next day, they did it laparoscopically and I was fine. I even had the bracelet on, and I just pushed it up, with my sleeve. I didn't even have time to cut it off. So we go straight from my hospital to her hospital. I'm like, take me right there. So I go in, and she sees me, and she looks at me, and she goes, and she would not speak out loud, but I could read her lips, and sometimes talk over the vent, but we were able to communicate just fine. And she said, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine. She goes, how are you? I said, what are you talking about? I'm fine. And she goes, and she's lying in bed, whatever. She goes, I am still your mother.
I was going to say, a mother knows.
My brother told her, but yeah, she's like, I don't care. I'm still your mother. And it was really interesting. It was an interesting thing. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's always, you just keep that respect and dignity, even if you have that role reversal. I remember one time in the hospital, and I couldn't believe this. In the hospital, you wouldn't think this. The doctor came in, or she was in the LTAC unit, whatever. The doctor came in, looked at me, and said, "How are you doing today, Miss Reed?" to me, and about my mother. And I looked at my mom and I said, "Mom, how are you?" And she answered me, and I looked back at the doctor and I said, "My mom just said she's doing okay." And it was like, I could communicate with her. You need to talk, but and even you don't think even doctors do that, but yeah, that was a big learning curve for me. And that my mom started the company with me in 2006. And then she had complications from, she had lung cancer previous, like a good, I don't know, 10 years before that, but she was still on some chemo, oral chemo, and she had complications from that, which led her into the hospital about a year and a half after we started working. So we were very, very close. But I learned so much in that 9-month period of time when my mom was through the system that I think it really helped me help my clients, because it changes. I mean, I can help other people's family all day long, but when it's your own, it's all bets are off, and it's different. So I think that made a difference.
Yeah. Something that you both have touched on is there is a point where someone else has to be allowed in, or, you're going to you are handling it. And then it would be better handled if you weren't handling everything, maybe is a way to put it. And so allowing someone else to come in and just be there for the companionship that yours is Apple Care and Companion. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I saying it right? And I'm brought to mind Mike George. I believe he's located in Canada. And Lori, you're nodding.
Yeah.
He created I guess I'm gonna say training. There's probably a lot more, but a training for the family, for the recipient, to just understand how to be ready to accept someone else in, and also how to continue to advocate going, "This isn't working, but I know why. It's for these reasons. I'm not," rather than just reluctance, it's, "This kind of person doesn't flow as well in our situation. This kind of person could if I give them a chance." And he knows it so well because he and his wife had a beautiful baby boy who would always, always need 24/7. And now he's an adult man. And at a point, they had to go through the pain. It was kind of excruciating to have someone else do what they had, and then leave. Like, he wasn't a brand new baby then, he was several years old, but it felt like going out on a date after your baby is brand new, and the whole time on the date, you're just chewing your fingernails, are they gonna do everything right? Is it gonna be okay? And all that, and they had to go through that letting, I don't know what to call it, that acceptance and that contentment and being having serenity when someone else, and I've experienced that as a hired caregiver, to have that person sit across the room on the sofa, and after many days going, "You can just go for a walk if you'd like to. This is going really well." And it's like, I will be right back." And it's like, "That is fine." And feeling like, "Is it okay if I push them out the door and let them breathe and go, 'Whew,
Right.
who am I again?' And, oh, look, the sun is shining through the branches. Oh," so
Yeah.
beautiful. Lori, you had said, well, I'm gonna say, Lori, how's your pain level? Do you wanna share that?
Me
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, 'cause
Um,
you're using your arm to talk, so I'm thinking you're doing pretty good.
well, the funny thing is the arm, I get my stitches out tomorrow. So the arm is actually pretty good. Once the RA started taking over, that pain was excruciating. And I tried to stay off all anti-inflammatory medication until I get the stitches out tomorrow, but I couldn't do it. So I went on prednisone. I took a couple of prednisone last night, and I'm feeling much better today.
Wow.
Yeah, but it reminded me of times, in preparation for this talk today, I was thinking about the times of caring for my mom when, over that 8-year period, there was a time once when we fell in the shower. I was transferring her and we fell into the shower and she was okay, but I sprained my ankle. And I continued to do all the care myself. And, I would get the flu or a cold, any of those things. And I felt the need to continue to do it all myself. And so those kind of things are what I try to teach caregivers not to do. It's like from my experience. And I recently published my book, and the reason I named it "You're a Caregiver, Not a Saint," and I'll just put that up there. Like, okay, so it's "You're a Caregiver, Not a Saint." Yeah, right. Because I use therapeutic journal writing in my teaching. So I try to help caregivers identify the emotions they're going through and how to let go of some things, how to understand the triggers, how to understand what they're going through as caregivers. But what happens so often is, if you haven't seen anybody in a while and they say, "What are you doing now?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I'm caring for my parents," or "I'm a professional caregiver now. This is what I do." And people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a saint. I could never do that." Right? You're amazing. You're so fabulous. And the problem is we as caregivers buy into that language. And when you do that, it makes it really, really difficult to ask for help or allow someone in to take on some of the burden that you're going through, because then you start feeling like you have to be this superhuman person. And I wish I had recognized all of that through my caregiving journey, because I just, put on my big girl panties and struggled through every day, right? When I didn't need to. And we were blessed in that we did not have financial constraints. I mean, I could have hired people. I could have done things like that. And mind you, I did for short periods of time throughout the journey. There's just so much emotion engaged when you're caring for someone, and you tend to have this need to put yourself on a back burner for some reason, So lots of emotion.
I just created a word in my mind. Tell me, both of you who are, my goodness, you have many more years than I did. I had those years of caregiving and scribbling little notes and throwing them in my bag saying, "Why isn't there something for this? Why isn't there a better shower chair? Why isn't there um, a place where you can go and get on screen because you have to stay there and go, 'It's really awful today,' and have everyone go, 'We know this, we've been there, we care about you, go ahead and scream about it for a while," and all those things do exist. But my families, the people I was in with, because I was in almost 100 different homes over an 8-year span. 4 years of that was intense, like 5, 6, 7 days a week. And they just I'm just like, "Where are these things? How can I find them?" And it was my husband who was always, going around the globe and talking to people on screens, that was like, "What you're finding and what you're writing about and everything needs to go farther," and brought me into the wonderful world of LinkedIn, and, gave me friends like you to say, let's talk about aging and please tell people what you do, your endeavors. So the word that just created in my mind is pedestalized. I've been pedestalized. Someone has put me up here and I'm like, ah, which means I'm being watched from every direction, more than 360 degrees, and I dasn't dare slip on my pedestal or go, I ugh. And even I would say for the people who say every day was a joy. I cared for my husband through thick and thin for over a decade, and every day was a joy. It was a gift. I was glad to do it. Everyone has a point where it changes, and that's what I'm finding in, for example, a daughterhood circle is
Right.
a place where you can go. It's not recorded, nobody gets to advertise anything, and you can just come and go. Literally heard this on one of them. I just heard the word hospice about 48 hours ago, and I don't even know how to be the caregiver of my loved one with something that's hospice. I mean, I can look it up, I can Google it, but I don't know how I should be now. I don't, and or they're gone, another person's like, "I still keep coming," and someone else goes, "Me too," because they have passed away, and I'm still kind of floating in space, just trying to reel in the air hose and see what's at the other end, what's next, and so all those
Well,
things could use
I'll
a
tell yes. Well, I'll tell you, there's something, and I don't know if you've heard this phrase before, but it's called compassion fatigue.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard that?
Oh,
Not
Yeah.
burnout. Burnout's
oh,
something different.
yeah.
Compassion fatigue. And I think and even like, and I had it really bad a few years, well, maybe 8 years ago. And that's when I first learned about this term, because I get a phone call and it would be a daughter whose mom broke her hip. And it was like, oh, I know what that means. I know what that journey is going to be. And I just, I just couldn't, you just get full too much. It's just, you're full up to here and you can't do it anymore. And personal caregiver, I mean, family caregivers get compassion fatigue. And like you said, you're put on a pedestal, but you can still feel that way. And I think that's okay. And now it's come out a lot where there's lots of places to go, lots of support. Compassion fatigue is kind of out in the public domain now, where I think that's wonderful.
Well,
And journaling, you even mentioned, there's so many ways now to help with compassion fatigue. But the first one is acknowledging it, and that you're not a saint, you're not on a pedestal, that you can just get fed up and you just can't take anymore, and you need to recharge your battery. I mean, there's
and Lori, I agree, and I also think that I don't care that there is a lot of education for professional caregivers about how to stay kind of distanced and how to this is your job and whatever. When you're in someone's home or even in a facility, when you're seeing that same person over and over and over again for say 3 months or 6 months or a year or 2 years, and then they're not any longer there is so much emotion involved in that. And you leave work on Friday and your patient, client, friend, right, was there, and then you come back on Monday and they're like, oh, by the way, you're getting a new person on Tuesday because that person passed or their family took them back home or whatever, they moved to hospice, whatever the circumstance may be. There isn't a lot of emotional work that is done with professional caregivers. And, I reach out to organizations, to big companies all the time, trying to get them to even use my book. In the back of my book, I have journaling techniques and prompts and exercises specific to caregiving. The grieving process there, I mean, You don't just grieve when someone passes away. You grieve as they lose each stage of their
Mhm.
abilities, right? There's, I mean, there's just so much emotion and feelings and challenging things that both family and professional caregivers go through. And I do a lot of compassion fatigue education with professional caregivers. And, I start with helping them find a balance between caring enough to give good care and not caring so much that they're taking that person's challenge home with them, right? And you have to be a good communicator because you're communicating with all these different pieces of the family, as well as the person that you're caring for, as well as your supervisor and all. I mean, there's just so much. It's no wonder the turnover rate is so ridiculously high in that industry, you know? But compassion fatigue is huge.
I wanted to create I was an employee, not, in charge. I wanted to create a corner, and I found it. It was just a wide part in the hallway and something that used to be a lot of people coming in and out. They changed, and put a different entrance, so that wide part of the hallway didn't really help anymore, because the entrance was elsewhere now to that section, and I wanted to create an area with, s chairs that had wings on them that you could just sink into for the caregivers. Like I said, I worked in communities that were independent living, and there were, visiting angels and Horizon and all these different groups would come, fluttering in and fluttering out, plus the people that were hired right there on in the spot on the campus. And I wanted wingback chairs, I wanted a water feature, I wanted stones with permanent pins, I wanted a board where someone could simply write one word, very HIPAA compliant, no identifying, but just to be able to write mashed potatoes and put it up there. It may have been the last thing that they were eating with you before they were not able to eat anymore, or, something like that. Just a spot where someone could grab some Kleenex or just pop in some earbuds and listen for a while or something, and it's like, "Oh, that's the corner where we don't disturb that. We can sit there and read the notes, we can add to it." That was my envisioning, that would be for anyone who's hired and goes, "Oh," because I've done that. I've shown up at a door and told, "They're not here," and it just the word didn't get to me in time, and, it's, "Oh,"
Yeah.
and I have been invited to come to a hospital, and I have been invited to memorials services. And I'm grateful that some of them thought about that
Mm.
they realized that I was restoring humanity as kind of the extra daughter-in-law you never knew you needed until now, and that was acknowledged. So, Lori Miller, you were talking about acknowledging this could be compassion fatigue. I'm not a saint, Lori LeMasters. I whatever a saint is supposed to be, are they supposed to do their little hands and have this little look all the time of, "Oh, this is always what I, was designed and purposed to be," or am I still just a human being? And
With
in
natural. Yeah.
any other relationship situation, there would be a go-between or a mediator or a conflict resolution person or something. I'm so glad you 2 have really made a business and put out there what other people are like, "Oh my goodness, that was me years ago. Now I'm validated. oh my goodness, I wasn't crazy or selfish or I don't know. I'm grateful for both of you is what I'm trying to
Thank
say.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am. I was taken, you know, in one of your, while you were talking, Christine, one of the things that you said was, you know, this a person in the daughterhood, I think it was, circle commented about how, you know, they this is sort of summation of what caregivers tend to do. I loved every minute of it. I'm so grateful for it. I'm so, you know, we tend to look at it such big picture. And I do the same. I mean, I would not let go of those 8 years that I had with my parents ever. But was every day a treasure? Was every day beautiful? Was every day easy? No. Were there moments when there was easiness and beauty and love? Absolutely. But were there also moments of frustration, anger, resentment? Those are very natural emotions that we should have. If we try to deny that, that only creates bigger problems down the road, right? And so it's very important to acknowledge, you know, no one's home, and Lori, I know you see this with your clients, I'm sure all the time. No one's home has a perfect family dynamic, right? There is the sibling that is just difficult. There is the sibling that steps up to do the care. There is the sibling that does nothing, has disappeared, you know, I mean, and there's resentment about that. And there's unspoken expectations. You know, I had so many unspoken expectations. Like I thought, you know, well, they should be doing this or they want, you know, they should be doing that. Well, they can't read my mind, right? So, but you have to just, I grew up in a very, we had our issues prior to my mom getting sick, as most families do. You know, I've had caregivers in my classes who are caring for an ex-spouse because nobody else stood up to do it, right? And there was no other option. You don't think that there are triggers and, you know, difficult emotions around that? There absolutely are. So that is the challenge in looking at the caregiving journey through rose-colored glasses, right? You have to be realistic about the process.
Right. And I've seen, like you said, I've seen when there's siblings involved, and it's really interesting. They kind of revert back to where they were as kids. Like the older sibling, oh, mom loved you the best, or whatever it is. And it's really interesting to see. But I think you don't know how people are dealing with their parents aging or their parent decline. And I think if they don't speak about it or communicate, you have to meet them where they are. In our family, I know my brother was very uncomfortable ever talking about death or talking about certain topics. The middle brother, the older brother was much more comfortable with that. So we were able to kind of acknowledge that and not put that burden on the middle brother. Like we just wouldn't give him that chore or that task to deal with having to do that. And I think it's really important. And if there's too much dysfunction in the family, you do need an outside mediator or someone, a care manager or an agency. There's someone who can help with that communication piece. And there's so many other ways to get it now because there's some fantastic technology out there that can help with caregivers, a lot of apps, a lot of great stuff so that, and it usually, we know it all usually falls on the daughter or daughter-in-law. Not always, but it seems to more so than not. But that person shouldn't have to then pick up the phone and call everyone. I mean, in our situation, we have a family portal, and the family can go online and see the care notes, see the schedule, and see what it is, so that it's not a burden on one person. But I think there's workarounds. But I think you're right. You have to acknowledge that the family dynamics play a huge role in caring for aging parents. That's probably the bigger piece of the puzzle than anything else.
That's another whoop whoop for
Yeah.
technology,
Oh, yeah.
is that yes, we're humans. We want relationships. They are going to not go the way that we feel like we want them to go. My feeling can change from the morning to the afternoon. It's like, why isn't anybody contacting me? And by the afternoon, it's like, my goodness, I can completely flip. So no one should have to put up with that with me. I love that you said that your own family has a portal. It's like
Yes.
it can be there. It doesn't have to be the tone in my voice, that
Well, and
is a
especially things
trigger.
like texting, right? Texting, it's so difficult for people to, were they being curt? Were they being, we can read so much into that stuff. So a portal is beautiful in communication. I tell some families to do a family journal and just leave it out on the counter around, because I teach 18 different techniques of journaling. So I teach them unsent letters and perspective writes and character sketches and things to help people kind of see we don't always see how we contribute to the challenge in the relationships and the things that are going on, right? And so I try to walk them through all of that. But a family journal is good for two things. Number one, I was here and mom did this and this is whatever. But then I always encourage them to add a feeling around being with mom today felt really whatever, felt really great or felt really frustrating and why. And yeah, because it's the medical piece of it, like you said, Lori, the medical piece of it that's cut and dry, right? That's she can't comb her hair, but she can do this. She all of that. But when your employees come into a home where there is maybe a family caregiver that's living there, and that family caregiver was up all night with the mom or dad, and they didn't sleep well, and then they're sort of curt with your employee or they're not helpful, that's a lot of stuff for everybody. That's a lot of dynamics going on in one location. And so teaching people the skills to be able to manage that stuff, that's the hard part, I would imagine, Lori.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting you say that, because the good caregiver is one who really is so empathetic and is feeling, but she also wears her emotions on her sleeve. And so is very thin skinned. And then you go into that situation, and then the family caregiver, like you said, had a bad night and is maybe curt. Well, then they're going to get a little upset. So it's hard to find, if you get that really thick skinned caregiver, which is great, because sometimes if you have a difficult client, but then can they bond as well?
Right.
It's interesting. A really great interview question is, you ask potential caregiver, what is your most favorite client and your least favorite client? Because and if it's ever the same person, that's an awesome caregiver, because that means they were really hard, real tough nut to crack. Like, maybe it was dementia or whatever it is, or just ornery, and they broke through and they got inside, and then that became their favorite client. Or if someone says, oh, they've never had a favorite client or they've never had a least favorite client, then that means they're not they can't identify with anybody, like they're not making a connection at all.
They're not finding that good balance.
Yeah. So because you want someone who has a least favorite client, because that means they were affected by that person. There was stuff they couldn't get through or whatever. But it is interesting. That's finding that balance between thick and thin skin, because you need both. But it's the education. You're right. So much of it, Lori, is educating that it's not them. Like if someone's curt, whether it's the family caregiver or the client themselves, they're going through a lot. And sometimes we see when when the older adult can say no or can be mean, that's maybe the only power they have. And they need to use it because they're losing everything around them. But they can either control you, which that would give me power, right? Like I can yell at you and then I'm still in control. But if you understand that, then you kind of go with it and you don't get upset by it.
Right. And the beautiful thing about your care providers coming into that situation that makes it easier than for a family member is that they don't know that person any other way, right? So one of the things that I work on a lot with caregivers of folks with dementia or chronic pain or chronic illness is to process the grieving, to go through the grieving process of who that person was and who they are today. So, because it's really hard to do a lot of that deflecting and just, you know, I'm sure you guys, you see this a lot, Lori, or your employees see this a lot, where, you know, a family member comes in and starts arguing with no, it's Monday and it's 10 o'clock, right? And it's like, does it matter? You know, I'm constantly telling caregivers, are they safe? That's the only thing you need to ask yourself. Are they safe? Does it matter that they know what day it is, or that the window is open or closed, or that they have a dog or they don't have a dog? But because they haven't let go of that relationship of that they had with that person before, they can't get comfortable with who that person is today. Whereas for your staff, it's got to be much easier to just come in because that's who they know them as.
Right. In the moment. Just make that moment, live in the moment.
You remind me, years ago, my mother, who is now 91, she came back from visiting her own mother, who was in a different state and in memory care. And she was able to voice, speaking of emotions and just really painting a perfect picture. I can see it. She said, out on the veranda, we're in the sunshine in California at a table. At the other table is also a woman using a wheelchair, 3 or 4 people around, and each one was grilling her. So my mother is describing not her own mother, but another woman she did not know. Then what's my name?
Oh.
Do you, Mom, it's me. It's Diane. You know, you remember, you know, and then that was the, you know, they can remember your name, but not my, you know,
Right.
and, you know, what's wrong, etc. And she was able to voice, don't do that with me. Just
let me
be with me. Don't do that. It just affected her more than being with her own mother that day, was watching that going on. And yes, she wasn't. I will simply say there's that what we learned from Teepa Snow and many others is that you are the one who can change the way you are. They cannot change their disease, any disease, and that disease happens to be some form of dementia. But you can change the way that you approach that. And I have to change the way I'm approaching you. To ladies, I have to say, how can people be sure to connect with you, to just learn more, see more, read more, understand something about this? Because every single time I walk into a place, if they see my badge I don't have on right now, wherever I have it, it's behind the laptop, and they're just like, oh, and out comes if only I'd known you 3 years ago, or I can't believe this. This business lady hugged me and she goes, I'm so glad you walked in here today to talk about something completely different. She goes, everything is just falling apart with my
Mhm.
parents. And so there's
Yeah.
always someone who's right at that moment, or has somebody that they're caring about who's going, "Ah, everything's happening." How can they get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you? Maybe somewhere where there's some recordings that you've made that they can go, "Oh, yes, there we go. They're speaking my language." I'm going to start with Lori Lemasters.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, so my website is called carepartnersresource.com. And I have a Facebook page, Care Partners Resource and Consulting, where I offer free prompts and writing techniques. I have a YouTube channel, Care Partners Resource and Consulting, where I do the same. And I also do Tuesday talks outside the box. And I have some recordings on there of things that I've done with AARP, and just different communication with caregivers all around the journaling piece of it, because that's what got me through my caregiving journey, was being able to learn these journaling techniques. And then also my book, You're a Caregiver, Not a Saint. Yeah, Right, WRITE. And that's available on Amazon. And you can get that also on a link through my website. And
Oh,
if you have questions or want to email me, it's Lori, Lori, at carepartnersresource.com.
Lori Miller, did you hear what I heard? I used to be a classroom educator. I used to be a teacher for elementary. I heard CPR.
Yes.
This is CPR, Care Partners Resource. This is CPR. I need CPR right now. I'm a caregiver. I just realized I'm a caregiver. Or I need to invite caring into my realm. I need to share my throne. I had all this. I had it, and right now I need to have a little bigger village that I'm relying upon. So, Lori Miller, tell us about apple. That's easy. I can see the apple because it's shaped like a heart, and you have it in different colors in different places. Your
I love
turn.
it.
So I have my website for Apple Care and Companion is applecareandcompanion.com. The and is spelled out. I also have everything on my LinkedIn profile. So Laurie Miller, you can find me on there. We didn't talk about my new theagetechnow.com, which I have a database where I am listing the technology products that are available now for consumers. So kind of some of the stuff we talked about. That's agetechnow.com. And then the final thing, which if we have a minute, I'd love to talk about National Healthcare Decisions Day, which is April 16th, which really flowed through our entire conversation today when we're talking about how do we want to treat our older adults or the people we're caring for. It's so important for us to share our wishes for what we want for end-of-life care so that our children can know, our loved ones and children can know what to do. Just like the woman that your mom saw, or the people in the memory care that your mom was able to say, don't do that to me. And that's huge. So I have a website called conversationreadynTX.com. Stands for North Texas, but could be for anybody. But it has a lot of great resources, a lot from the Conversation Project.
Love
So
them.
those three websites are the best way to find me. That on LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook page and a Twitter and all that, but probably the LinkedIn or the individual websites, because you can always contact me from any of those websites. But I've put on the Conversation Ready NTX.com some great ideas for you to have the conversation, or if you're a business or a company, how to help your employees, or to share, to create awareness. I even have some social media posts. You can just copy and paste them and put them on your own social medias, just to make it easier. So just try to make it easier, create awareness, because it helps everybody. It's such a gift to share your end of life wishes and how you want to live before you die. Not your funeral, not pre-need arrangements, not the medical, not the legal, but just kind of the value-driven, overall kind of arching, what direction do you want me to
Yes.
do?
Yes. Who are you at the core? And these are your living wishes
Mhm.
in those, I don't know what to call it, in that arena where you're talking more about and when I'm gone, and when you are going to be without me, and you're still living, and maybe what you want to do is give something to them right now. It's like, don't even think of this as an inheritance. It's just the thought occurred that I would love to see you with this in your hands and have you know that you're loved, or that your part in my life has been valuable, because it's not always blood relatives. It's often just that deep, committed, devoted friend, or a new friend, or someone that you just want to bring encouragement to. Both of you would always be welcome to come back, because I know we didn't cover everything with Lori LeMasters either. And Lori Miller, I want you to know that next week, Vida Rusin said, can we, oh, the cat is here. That means the show's ending. Vida Rusin said, can we do an aging tech talk? And so she invited one person, I invited some. If you have capacity, you can just jump right back on next
Oh,
week
that'd
if you want to, and talk about that whole other thing that we just kind of started when I was like, whoop, whoop for tech. So both of you are always invited to say, hey, can I come back in, or let me know who you've got coming on, or wouldn't you like to have this person come, and can I be there too? I'm open to all of it.
Thank you.
You are wonderful. The cat is like going to walk right across here and make you disappear. So I'm going to start waving right now. I am
Thank
so
you.
grateful for both of you, for everything. And thank you for spending this hour with me.
Thank you so much.
You betcha. I really appreciate both of you.
Thank you.